Powerful insights often occur when you least expect them. On Transformative Leadership Conversations, they're at the heart of every episode. Hi, I'm your host, Winnie da Silva. In this episode, I'm sharing short, focused leadership insights, practical ideas, myths worth challenging, and tools you can immediately apply in your work. Together, we'll explore what it really takes to lead effectively today, from understanding your role and the value you create, to sharpening the ways you think, communicate, and solve problems as a leader. So in each episode, you'll walk away with inspiration, strategies, and practical tools to strengthen your leadership, build effective teams, and lead thriving organizations. Okay, so let me start with something that might feel familiar. You've probably had a moment, maybe in the last couple months, where you made what you felt like was a real solid case for something. Right? You presented an idea, you gave thoughtful feedback, you explained something pretty clearly and backed it up with some really good reasoning. And the response you got was nothing, or hesitation, or maybe polite agreement with no real movement or commitment. And afterwards, you're thinking to yourself, I explained that really clearly. Why didn't that land? So a lot of times in those moments, we assume the problem is the strength of our argument. And maybe that's true, right? But sometimes the issue isn't the quality of the idea. It's that the message wasn't connected to something that the other person or the other people in the room, what they actually care about. Today, I want to talk about a very simple leadership tool that helps with just that. It's the idea of currency. So the very definition of leadership is leading people towards something, right? Towards change, action, results. So when we think about leadership, we often assume influence comes from authority. But in reality, much of leadership happens without authority. And in fact, counterintuitively, the more senior you become, the more this sometimes becomes true. Maybe unless you're the CEO. Because your influence has to expand beyond your direct team, right? You need to start now influencing with greater impact your peers, other senior leaders, cross-functional partners, other people across the organization, and of course, critical stakeholders and clients outside the organization. Your influence has to work horizontally across the enterprise, not just vertically. So the question becomes, how do you lead effectively without authority? Okay, now while that's a whole nother episode on its own that we might get to at one point, one powerful way to understand something on how to do this is this thing called currency. I'll explain in detail what it means in a minute. But first, let's talk about something that happens to all of us. Most of us walk through our day pretty clear about what matters to us. Maybe what we value most is being seen as competent, delivering results, being recognized by our contributions. Now, those things become our internal drivers. But here's the challenge. We often assume that everyone else values what we value. But that assumption might be wrong. Because, of course, different people care about different things. Until we understand what someone truly values, it can be very difficult to influence them, especially when we're leading without authority. So this idea of currency isn't something that I invented. It comes from Alan Cohen and David Bradford, who wrote a classic book called Influence Without Authority. So they use this idea of currencies to describe the things people value in organizations, the things people are willing to exchange in cooperation for. So in other words, influence often works like some kind of an exchange. People respond when something connects to what they care about. I've used this idea for years in leadership coaching and team development because it's simple, but incredibly powerful. Okay, so let's finally define currency. Currency is simply this, the thing someone values most, right? So it's what they most want to protect or build or advance or be known for. So some examples of common currencies are these: reputation or brand, excellence or high standards, my relationships or how I collaborate with others, inclusion and fairness, learning and challenge, recognition and advancement, visibility, competence, ownership or independence. Now, most people tend to have one or two dominant currencies. Not that all those things are important, but people usually have one or two big drivers, right? But the challenge is that we're usually tuned into our own currency, not other people's. So this quick win is about learning to tune into someone else's currency. So a simple starting point is this. Think about a person you want to influence right now, right? So maybe it's a peer, maybe it's your boss, a team member, maybe it's a board member, maybe it's a senior stakeholder. Then you'll want to ask yourself this. What does this person care about most? What evidence from their behavior suggests that? So clues often show up in things like, what do they emphasize? What do they reward? What do they talk about frequently? What do they protect? So if you're not sure yet, gather some data. Pay attention in meetings. Notice what seems important to them. Sometimes, honestly, you can just ask people directly, what do you really care most about? You'll notice that some patterns will emerge. Now, once you have a sense of someone's currency, the next step is to think about the message that you want to deliver. So what are you trying to influence? Maybe you want to build trust. Maybe you want to give someone some feedback. Maybe you want to propose an idea you want them to embrace, or to convince someone to invest in your project, or you want to align around a plan. You need to think about what is it that you want them to do. Then ask yourself this, how can I frame my conversation, my presentation, whatever it is that you're communicating, in a way that connects to what they care about? So it's the same potential message, but a different framing. That shift can dramatically change how people respond to your request or what you're trying to do with them. So understanding someone's currency can help in many leadership situations. For example, I'm going to give you 4. Influencing stakeholders. This is a huge one. Influencing your boss, senior leaders, peers, people you don't have formal authority over. 2, building trust. Your title doesn't automatically create trust. You've got to build it with people. 3, communicating with intent. So presentations, proposals, strategic conversations. What are those situations where you want people to align around an idea, make a commitment, make an investment, do something? And then the last one where currency is really powerful is when you're giving feedback. When giving feedback is connected to something that someone cares about, it lands really differently. So let me give you a few examples around each of those 4, okay? So influencing stakeholders. Imagine you're a principal at a consulting firm and you're hoping to be promoted to a partner. The promotion process is somewhat opaque, like it usually is, right? But you know certain senior partners that they're going to be influencing the decision. So most people approach these conversations like this, emphasizing things like revenue generation, clients that they've won, projects that they've delivered. Now, while all of those might be really important, imagine that the most influential partner actually cares more about something else. What they care deeply about is the culture and legacy of the firm. They want to see partners who are mentoring junior consultants and strengthening the organization long-term. So now the conversation shifts, right? Instead of focusing only on revenue, you're going to highlight things like mentoring junior staff, developing future leaders, how you've contributed to the firm's culture. So it's the same accomplishments, but you're framing things differently, aligned with their currency. Let's go to an example of building trust. So imagine someone new joins your team, right? So they're a peer, but they've previously worked with your boss and they already have some credibility and knowledge about your boss. You want to build trust with that person pretty quickly. A helpful question you might want to ask is, what might this person care about most right now, right? So for someone entering a new organization, their currency at that moment might include something like this. They want to contribute quickly, they want to establish credibility, and they want to feel respected. So instead of keeping distance from that person, you might share insights about how the organization works, help them navigate relationships, or help them get up to speed faster. Supporting something they care about builds trust faster. Okay, what about communicating with intent? So let's imagine you're a CEO preparing for a board presentation. In addition to thinking about what you want some of the outcomes to be from that meeting, you also want to ask yourself this: what does each person in that room, what do they care about? Now, some board members will certainly care about financial performance, obviously, right? But others may care about other things like customer growth, innovation. What's the long-term strategy? How are they incorporating my ideas? So thinking about the currencies from all those different perspectives can help you as the CEO frame that conversation or that board presentation in ways that resonate with the people in the room. Last example, giving feedback. Currency is very powerful when giving feedback. So let's imagine you have a direct report who works extremely hard and cares deeply about producing excellent work, but they struggle to delegate. In their mind, delegating risks lowering the quality of work. So if you say something like you need to delegate more, they might resist that. But if you connect the feedback to something they care about, like let's say their growth as a leader, the message could land completely differently. So instead, you might say something like this: you're doing excellent work, and that's definitely one of your strengths. But if you want to grow into a leader you're capable of becoming, you'll need to start developing your team and delegating more work. Wow. Okay, so now the feedback connects to something they value in a very different way. In all of these situations, the issue isn't the strength of the argument. The difference is whether the message connects to something the other person actually values. So when you understand someone else's currency, conversations can become easier, influence definitely increases, and trust can build faster. And leading without authority becomes far more effective. Influence is a skill, and learning to recognize someone's currency is one way to hone that skill and hopefully achieve what you want from that relationship, while at the same time understanding that person better, and maybe even helping them in the process too. Thank you for listening to this episode of Transformative Leadership Conversations. If you're ready to take your leadership to the next level or empower your teams for success, I'm here to help. Reach out to me directly at winnie@winifred.org or visit www.winniedasilva.com to learn more about my work coaching executives, developing critical leadership skills, and helping organizations build effective teams. You can also find me on Substack, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And remember, you're always welcome to take a seat at the table, where every conversation has the potential for transformative change.